Cool. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see some people that maybe we saw over the summer and some new people. I'm Fisher, here with Charlie, who say some things in a moment about her practice. But just super grateful that you're taking the time to spend some attention and effort with us this afternoon. In a moment, we'll set a little bit of context, we'll go over a few things, and then dig right into the session. But Charlie, is there anything you want to say just as we get started with this?
What do I want to say? I think just that we're happy to be working with you again after the summer meeting. That I fell in love with data scientists after the summer, and working with between you guys and working with the University of Washington's eScience Institute with all their hackathons over the summer. I just fell in love with data science, are my new favorite peeps. So glad to be here with you.
Cool. So part of what this workshop in particular feels like sort of the trickiest to pull off, because this one is focused on like, how do you host a session where you're trying to get work done with people, right? You have some tasks, you have some tangible work, but we as a group don't really have tangible work to get done. So there's like this double like sort of layer of like, how do we simulate a session where you can like sort of have to imagine applying the methods we'll use in the session to getting work done with a group, even though we don't have any like specific work we need to get done. So we might run a couple of things where we ask for a few people to volunteer. Just a quick example from a session that you might host, so that we can play around with something that gives everybody a chance to relate to the method or the tools that we're sharing, without necessarily needing to make specific progress on something. So part of what we'll spend quite a bit of time on today is really digging into the design of your session itself. So these workshops, the three that Charlie and I have designed, sort of with the invitation of Susan and Megan and their help, really moving from thinking just about specific engagement techniques that you can use to also thinking about how do you kind of coordinate an overall session design that is meant to, really enhance some of the things that ESIP does so well, which is build a sense of community, build a sense of connection, build a sense of collaboration between people. So really thinking beyond just like the content of your session into how does that session contribute to the wider purposes and goals of ESIP also as a network. And so that's sort of what we're going to focus a bit on today. I'm going to go to screen share just for a moment so people can see some things. And as best we can, we're going to try in the structure of this workshop to model some of the things that we're talking about. So it may be imperfect, but we're going to do our best. So the kind of agenda today is to get settled in, do what we're doing now, which is set up a little bit of context. Charlie, in a moment, will introduce you to the first sort of dip into thinking about the elements that make up a session and how you might think about composing yours. Then we'll do a couple demonstrations with specific tools and specific methods before creating some space and time for you to really sit with your own session and sort of match make between the elements, your own session goals, and the specific tools. And then we'll close out. One of the tools that we are going to briefly introduce is something that kind of creates a visual agenda for groups. So instead of just having sort of a list, and in particular for sessions where you're trying to get work done with a group, creating sort of a visual way of tracking the tasks and moving them around can be helpful. And so this is just a simple Google slide. We'll share these materials with you in a moment. But the idea is, as we're going, we can use this, and we'll come back to this at every part of this workshop, sort of show you and the group what's planned, what's coming up, and move it more tangibly than just saying it's an item on a list. And you can potentially begin to imagine if these are work tasks as opposed to agenda items, it might start to reshape how you think about working with a group when all of the tasks are visible and sort of able to be manipulated. So this is just a way of showing an agenda that's visual and related potentially to getting work done together. I think with that, a couple of just little tiny things about Zoom. And I think the winter meeting is going to be hosted on Zoom now. So some of these things can be helpful. For instance, we tend to or try to use chat quite a bit to drop instructions into chat so people have a record of it there in addition to whatever's on the screen. So you'll see us use chat quite a bit. If you want to edit your name in Zoom, it's very easy to do so. So you can just hover over your own tile. And if you click the three little dots and select rename, you can then change your display name in Zoom. So you can add maybe your location, maybe the organization or the work that you do. You could add your pronouns. So if you want to do that, that's the easiest way to do so. And I think with that, Charlie, anything else you want to say just about setting context, getting started, preparing to
You've done a lovely job.
Okay. So we're going to do one thing just to help people begin very briefly to connect at the beginning of the session. And we're going to do this right now just in chat. So I'm going to come out of screen share, and we're going to have a sequence of chat prompts that you can just respond to, but we're going to ask you to not hit enter until we say go. So you're going to type your response, hold off on hitting enter. If you do accidentally compulsively hit enter, do not worry, nothing terrible will happen. Okay, so the first chat prompt is just to compose like a little 5-word biography for yourself, and no bonus points are awarded for cleverness here. So you can be clever, but no bonus points are awarded for cleverness. So a little 5-word biography, again, can be as personal or professional as you choose for it to be, as poetic or straightforward as you choose. And go. Whoa, that's fun. Okay, some people chose to be clever. Oh, funny. Oh, these are good. Okay, next prompt. And this, I'll be 100% honest, this is nonsense. So don't worry about the fact that it's nonsense. This is, I'm trying to remember. So I read through some of the session descriptions, and some person's biography somewhere included this word in it. So I just grabbed that word when I was preparing these. So don't worry if this makes no sense to you. So the word liminal means to me, ... What does the word liminal mean to me? I see Beth's like face like, can I consult a dictionary first, please? There's nothing great. Oh, that's funny. Those are very funny. So we could imagine, let's replace the word, for instance, for the next prompt. What's the, Megan, I'm gonna need you to help me. What's the ESIP area that people kind of tend to be a little bit like, what is that thing? Is it semantics? Yeah, yeah. So now imagine our session was about semantics. So let's replace liminality. Semantics is relevant to me because. So if we think about semantics, why is that maybe relevant to you? If imagine right now we're hosting a session about existential dread. Why is liminality and semantics relative to you? Cool. Okay. One more chat prompt. So the adjacent topics or domains that for you are connected to semantics. So if you're thinking about the topic of semantics, what are some of the adjacent topics or domains or research areas that you see connected to that area? Like what's the map sort of in your mind of stuff related to semantics? Cool. So let's just pause now for a second. So we're imagining, this is, you've showed up to a session about semantics. We have, as a session lead, not really sure who's coming to the session, like you don't necessarily get a very clear sense of the people that are arriving. Something like this, just like 3 real simple prompts, can give you a sense of like, okay, maybe people don't know what semantics are, but this prompt, like, okay, people are in the territory of semantics. They're able to relate to it through other domains, other practices. That might give you as a session host, a little clue about how to, modify or what to draw out or what to focus on. Are there other prompts people can think of that at the beginning of a session might be helpful or useful to you as a session host as people are kind of arriving and you're trying to get a sense of, where you want to focus or what kind of emphasis to place on different elements in the session?
I could see a quick like number line poll on what's your comfort level with this topic on a scale of 1 to 5 for a quick visual on that.
Leslie, yeah, nice. Any other things people might imagine at the beginning? Or other ways that you might want to both kind of create both connection between people showing up and to the topic at hand? So if this is a session about liminality or semantics, people, maybe vaguely started to connect to that topic as they arrived, but other ways that you have that you might try for inviting people to orient to the topic? Lindsay, what do people hope to get out of the session? I always find that for me is like a double-edged question, because it's like, am I really prepared to to meet what you want to get out of the session right here after I now know what you want to get out of it? It's like, oh, that's maybe not what I'm prepared to do. Cool. All right, let's take a little shift. Charlie, do you want to introduce us to kind of how this little way of getting started fits within the bigger context of thinking about the elements of a session and the design of it?
Are you going to share your screen?
I can if you want me to, yeah.
Yeah, please do.
Oh, where am I? I have so many things open. Am I on the right thing?
Yeah, and next slide. Okay, thank you. What Fisher and I have designed is something called a session design matchmaker. And the matchmaker, in a minute, we will show you the full matchmaker. But for right now, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background and what we're hoping to achieve with this matchmaker design that we have. It started with a couple of conversations with Megan and Susan, where they were asking us to, could we help the ESIP members, the session host, design their sessions in a similar way that Fisher and I might design them if we were working with you. How to design these sessions where they're a little bit more interactive and engaging with the participants. And so when Megan and Susan told us, we were asking about what's the range, what are the types of sessions that are offered, the range, and the focus was on, 3 top ones emerged, which was getting work done together in a session, getting and giving some feedback, and presenting some state-of-the-art research or demonstration or training workshop. And so when Fisher and I were chatting about, okay, given that range of the type of sessions that are going to be offered, is there some type of common building blocks, threads, that if they were to pick some of these elements, what we're calling elements now, and string them together, would actually build out an entire session for them? And we landed on the 8 that you see here on this slide. And you see that they create a context and close and depart are in different colors. That's because we imagine that everyone is going to have this. No matter what you're envisioning for your session, you're going to open and begin in some way by creating a context. And you will close and prepare participants to depart in some way. Everything in between, you can choose and mix and match and order and duplicate in any order. And by combining these 7 elements, you will be able to design a session. And let's see, I think at this point, it would be good to go ahead and take you to the full template for the matchmaker. Let me get over here to chat. Fisher's also.
You have it, Charlie?
There we go.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've just posted a link to the Google, the matchmaker into Google Slides. And in a minute, I will explain all of what this is, how we think it will, you can use it to build out your session. But before we get started, it might be good just for everyone to download because this is like a template, a worksheet, personal worksheet. So if you could go up to the top and click on File and hit Download. Either if you have a Google Drive, you could copy it over to your Google Drive or download it onto your device. Either one will work. So go ahead and snag your own copy. Okay. Thanks. Okay, so I think, let's see, this is your session. I want everybody to look at the copy that so that I can highlight things. What would be the best way to do that? Oh, just look in the Google Doc that you originally clicked on. That's great. Can you, yeah.
Do you want me to stop screen sharing, Charlie?
We can do both. That
Okay.
way, if people can have their preference, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so giving you I think what I want to do first is give you an overview of how the matchmaker worksheet will work. And then I'll come back so that you'll get a sense of what we're aiming for. And then I'll come back and then start diving into what are each of these elements. And then the design options that you can choose from to mix and match to make your sessions more engaging and interactive. So the first step that you see, the first two rows there are the 7 design elements that you can, at some point we're imagining, like for instance, create a context. You can click on that. You'll be able to come over and go, yeah, I'm going to choose that. And we need that. And close and depart. I know I'm going to want to include that into my design, right? And then step 2 is you'll see in each column, there's various options that you can choose from. For instance, let's see, establishing a baseline. Fisher gave you some options with chat a few minutes ago on how to establish a baseline. And then there are some other options, and I'll come through and explain what all of the links are and what some of these options are, that some of them you may recognize and some of them you may go, I don't have a clue what that is. So at some point you'll make choices about what you want, what options that you want to include in your design. There's timing associated with each of those. And then the third step, after you've made your choices, then you will add up the times and for each of those elements, and then you'll add up in step 4 the elements and see and hope that everything adds up to less than 90 minutes or less for your session. And if it goes over, I mean, then you can start making adjustments to, oh, I can't do all that I wanted to do. Or actually, I have more time than I think I did, and I can expand out and have that discussion longer than I thought I could. At that point, after you make your choices on what elements you want, what methods you're going to use to lead that element, you can transfer all of those down into step 5, which is what we call a design storyboard, which then is like you can put things in order that you want them. You can start adding more the timing. You can add more details in the invitation prompts and instructions. And by the end of putting this in here, this will essentially be your storyboard for your session. It'll be a place where you can keep track of any materials, any links, chat prompts that you want to give people, that it's all at your fingertips, right? And when you start stitching all of this together, you will start to see that it helps you keep track of the amount of time that each thing is going to take and in the preparation of your session. And in a working session, that can be pretty important, because in a working session, those can get kind of complex. So let's go back up to the top. And so I'm going to walk you through the elements and what some of the choices are. So in creating a context, it could be as simple as just welcoming participants and introducing yourself, any co-hosts that you might have, if you can have a panel discussion, what you want to get at, your hopes and aspirations for the session, you know, what maybe preparing participants for what they can expect by giving them the flow of the session. We've heard that some of you may want to include some homework. And so this is all part of creating a context, right? So it could be as simple as a presentation, or if you're going to add some homework, given the homework that's probably with links on Sketch. We've given an example here under structured writing. If you're given some pre-homework, then you may want to give them some questions to help them focus on the important bits that you're going to be linking to your session, the purpose of your session. And the links and examples that we're providing on this matchmaker are things that we have used. They made a few of them are taken from sessions that we helped you design in the summer meeting. I see, yes. Okay, so then, after you create a context, there may be times that you want to establish a baseline, like you want to discover the level of experience that's in the room with the topic that you're talking about. And there are various ways you can do that. You can use, and Fisher's going to show you at the end of this session, annotate. So you may want to annotate some graphic that you have, and Zoom allows you to participants to use annotate on top of that graphic. Chat like you experienced earlier. You could use Slido poll. You may have a set of questions or open sentences that you want them to complete into slides. Present, present something, a presentation or demonstration. You can do that the way that you normally think about it through a presentation. You could have a panel discussion, but then some alternatives to presentation and panel discussion is structure that we call user experience fishbowl. There's a link to what that is. We're not going to go into that in this session, but in the second session on tomorrow, we're going to let you experience what a fishbowl is. There's a sample of a fishbowl session guide that we used in the summer meeting for a drone workshop. And then there's one called celebrity interview. So user fishbowl, just a real quick, is where the panelists, instead of talking to the audience, they're having an informal conversation with each other that people are listening into. It tends to get a little bit more interesting, and you get nuggets out of it than if each of the panelists give their own presentation. And similar to a celebrity interview, instead of giving a presentation, you might be interviewed by someone. So it's a little bit more informal and has people feel like they're more related to you. The next column or element is you may want to include, so you may want to open up after your presentation, open up a Q&A session, or even go a little bit deeper to have a sense-making session where everyone is making sense of the information they've heard and they're integrating it as it relates to their own practice in some way. You can do that through chat, Slido poll, something that we call structured note-taking or personal sense-making, that it's just a guide, a writing guide that individuals use either during the presentation or right afterwards. There's some examples there. We'll go into those more detail tomorrow morning. You could do a sense-making guide instead of doing Q&A with everyone in the room, putting people into breakouts and talking about what they're hearing. And then there's another structure called What, So What, Now What, that helps people move through what they've heard, what meaning they're making of it, and like what next steps would be. Feedback session, a session where you want to focus on getting some feedback or generating ideas. let's see, again, tomorrow morning, Fisher's going to go into details using WISE crowds. You could also use the what, so what, now what framework. This, what we're calling 1x all, which is per time to do personal writing, go into breakouts and discussions, and then come back and hear what happens in discussions. And then you could have an open discussion, which we see quite a bit, but we'd like to encourage you to avoid these or use very sparingly. And the reason is you only typically, when you do, and anyone have any questions or anybody have any ideas or feedback and you open it up to a group, then what ends up happening is you only hear from a few individuals. Not everyone is involved in that process. And so the discussion or the questions are going to go in the direction of the few individuals versus really getting the depth and breadth of everyone in the room. You're going to be missing out on something to shape things. And then the one we're really interested in today, which is getting work, which is different, is a little bit different than the rest of the things on this worksheet are methods or using technology, chat, annotate, Slido poll in some way. Getting work together is more about focusing on how are you going to organize people? How are you going to go into, what are you going to do in those breakouts? And which is pretty important when you go into breakouts. What we found, even if you give great directions and you think things are clear, a lot of times when you put people in breakouts, it's really hard for them to facilitate themselves. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how you can help groups in breakouts be a little bit more productive. And okay, there we go. Let's see. And then there's close and depart. And you can do that just simply with a 5-minute presentation, summing up everything that happened, chat in some way, having participants chat about what they got out of the session, a Slido poll on how valuable the session is. And then you're going to experience today impromptu networking to help participants deepen and solidify what they got out of it. You may want to do a sign-up sheet or some type of annotation. So before we get into, Fisher has designed some activities for you to experience some of these things. I think I want to show you an example of, let me pull this doc down here so I can see and do. Okay, so for instance, if I think I want to design a session that's going to be mainly getting work done, I'm going to do a really quick design right here in front of you so you see how I'm going to use this tool. I want to
Hold on, Charlie, are you doing this in a new
I'm going
document?
to do a quick presentation. Let's see, quick presentation at the beginning to set some context. I think I'm probably going to want to do some pre-work, do some reading, give them some reading, and give them the participants that join in the session some questions or writing to do along. I want to do both of those things. Oops. Right here. Let's see. I think I may want to establish a baseline. I'm going to use Slido poll to do that. Maybe ask around the task, if I've missed anything, if I'm wondering if we don't have time for everything, participants may want to vote up the things they think is most important to work on in the session. I'm going to do some breakouts. And I think I want to do small breakouts where not everyone is working on a different task. Not everyone's working on the same task. Each room is got a different task that people are working on. And I think I want, people are going to want to contribute to more than one breakout. So I think I'm going to do a second round so they at least have a chance to contribute to 2 different tasks. I'll do a debrief. And then on ending, I will talk about what's going to happen with everyone's work, when next meeting's going to be, how they might join in. I'm going to have a sign-up sheet in case new members want to join this work. And that's it. So then what I would do is then go through and add up the times that I think it's going to take in each of those columns and put it down here and hope that I end up with something less than 90 minutes. And that's it on the overview for now. And then in a few minutes, we'll come back after we experience some of these activities. We will come back and you will get to work on your personal session, and Fisher and I will answer any questions about that as we go. Fisher.
Cool. So I know that's a lot. So that's like quite a bit of detail. There's a lot of options there. Plus there's all of the options that you. Oh.
I can hear you, Fisher.
Oh, you could hear me? Okay. Huh.
Yes.
Andrea, yes, I think we are going to be using Zoom for everything.
Zoom will be the choice, platform of choice, right?
Charlie, are you able to hear me at all? Huh. So Charlie...
Fisher, I can hear you, and I can quickly tell everyone, thank you to those of you who jumped on yesterday. We made a valiant effort to try Microsoft Teams, and it failed yesterday. So yes, our plan is to use
No, I can't.
For the sessions.
No, I can't hear. I'm going to log out and come back in.
We will work with our federal friends who are not able to access Zoom in conventional ways to do everything we can to maximize your experience. We were hoping for a better, another platform that would work, but Zoom's going to be it. So we're going to be switching a lot of meetings over to that just to increase our familiarity with it in the weeks leading up to the meeting.
Cool. Thanks, Susan. So yeah, so each of you has your own practice as well that you've developed. You have your own methods. So as you sort of metabolize this design matchmaker, also know that like it's not limited to the options here. You also have all of the many things that you've probably seen or experienced or tried that you can also add in as your own options. What we thought we would do before kind of having everybody just dig into their own design is show very briefly a couple of methods. And the 2 that we thought may be helpful, especially for sessions where you're trying to get work done, are 2 methods that you can actually use in a variety of ways. So one is this 1x all. You've maybe seen it elsewhere as sort of think, pair, share. If you have kids, maybe they are used to that in school. But the idea behind it is to create space for everybody to sort of sift and sort their responses, first on their own, then in pairs, then in a larger group, and sort of have multiple rounds of processing in parallel before getting contributions at the full group level. So what we need for this is someone to just volunteer like a task that you could vaguely imagine asking people to work on during a session you're hosting. Like, can anyone offer some kind of task that you're thinking, you might have people do in your session?
I can offer one.
Yeah, what is it? Great, Beth, thank you.
Use cases for air quality data in our sessions. So there are several things that need to be done, including developing user profiles, since we could have a variety of users from, mothers to policymakers to scientists for that data. So asking people to write a user profile might be a task.
Oh, that is so awesome. That is so helpful, Beth. Thank you. So can you say it one more time? So imagine you're facilitating the session right now. And for the purposes of just right now, to keep it sort of simple, can you just pick one of the ones that you'd want people to write a user profile for? And just kind of invite the group right now, what you would have them do in the session.
Yeah, so air quality is relevant to a wide variety of people for a variety of reasons, from mothers to policymakers to scientists. And we need to understand the user's needs before we can understand what kinds of services we should be providing to that user. So what I would like people to do is to choose a user that they have in mind and write a profile of that user. What are the issues for that person? What are their pain points? What are they trying to achieve? And what are their skills? Among other things. I guess there might be other things. But describe that person in a way that would help a developer decide what software might be helpful for that person.
That's so helpful. That's so great, Beth. So can I make one tiny tweak to this?
Sure.
So to demonstrate the method, so that's like such a perfectly clear task, Beth. So we're gonna have everyone do this
for our session.
And so everybody take like a minute alone and on a piece of paper or pull up a Google Doc or something, respond to Beth's prompt, which is to choose a user you have in mind and begin to compile a little profile for that user. And I tried to capture as best I could what Beth's sort of suggestions were for what could go into a short profile. Take probably 2 minutes alone to work on this. Okay, since this is a simulation, we don't have to make it perfect. So what we're going to invite you to do now is in chat, we just dropped a link, and the link will take you just to the presentation slide deck that we're using. So don't worry too much about that. But go down to starting on slide 24. There should be a bunch of blank slides. And you'll be in groups of about 3, maybe 2 or 3. And what we want you to do is kind of quickly share the profile that each of you wrote. And then see if you can refine one of those profiles into something that you want to write down. So you only need to bring one of the profiles forward, but take a little bit of time, sort of share what you came up with. If somebody feels pretty good about the one that they got started with, try to refine it and then add it to one of the blank slides. And just make sure you put your names at the top of the slide that you're going to work on. Any clarification? So you quickly share, figure out one that you want to refine, and then again, you'll just have not that much time. You'll have like 6 minutes total for all of this. So we're doing this as a simulation. You might in your session spend a little bit more time on it. With that, I think we're off. It is very fun to watch in real time, you all working. Clearly, you all did not take this as a simulation. You just like went right for it. These are pretty awesome. So Beth, I don't know if you want to really quickly take a look at what's in there and just maybe offer a little bit of commentary as you read through some of the things people generated. And maybe as you're going, think about what would be a second round prompt you might offer this group after they've sort of come up with the first sketch of the profiles.
Okay. Yeah, so I see somebody else went for the parent of an asthmatic child. That's what Ted and Yuan and I also wrote about. So I'll go ahead and look at this one. So we've got the parent of an asthmatic child who wants predictions of air quality indicators to know and to understand what triggers might create problems for this child. So that means the information needs to be accessible via phone or website easily for a non-technical person, possibly. There should be, it might need to include a map so that they can locate themselves in the appropriate context, and wants to have forecasting and available to know what's coming. Let's see what else we've got. We've got a state air quality control board wanting air quality information to determine if recent state emission laws are making a difference. Not skilled on the computer, so information needs to be, we talked about this in our session too, not necessarily coming at them in HDF files. Let's see, family physician. Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought about that one. Wanting to know how much air quality is affecting at-risk patients, making correlations between data and air quality, variations, and possibly, how those correlate with health symptoms, to make recommendations to their patients. So yeah, there's such a wide variety of potential users out there that we want to take one of these profiles or maybe break into additional breakout groups and work with a profile to determine what kinds of solutions we might be able to offer to these types of users. How can we help these users as the ESIP air quality cluster? That's my spiel.
Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna take a little pause. Thank you, Beth. That was
thank you. Now my
session
is designed.
So this method, this little tiny, simple, kind of embarrassingly simple method of like everybody alone, spend some time, come together. You can imagine, especially in a working session, you could do a couple iterations of this really quickly in a row. That whole sequence took, 9 minutes, 10 minutes. So in your session, you might be able to get through 2 or 3 of these iterations, just as Beth was previewing there. It's like, okay, we now have some quick profiles. What's the next thing we want to do with them? So as we shift into the design of, we're thinking about design, this is one of those things to keep in mind is like, how do you quickly generate and refine with a group in fast iterations? And this is just a sort of simple, reliable way to do it, is get everybody to do it alone for a second. Then in small groups, try to find one that they're able to cohere around, and then do some work on it, pick it up in the plenum, move back out, and bounce back and forth. There also might be situations where you want to, and this might actually work with what you were suggesting, Beth, which is take a couple of these and dig into them a little bit more concretely. And one way to do that is this little method we call what, so what, now what. And the idea behind it is to really slow down and sort of separate the action from the sort of observation, or I know I'm talking to data scientists, so I'm going to use the word data, but I might mean it less concretely. But the idea is like to move from like, what are our observations? What do we know? What's been our experience? What are the sort of the facts? Then collectively move into interpretation, the so what. So what meaning does this make? So what can we derive from this? So what are the implications of this? Into the now what? Now what are we going to actually do? Now what are our suggestions? Now what can we provide? And the idea here is that at least socially, we each tend to have access to different facts, different observations, but we rarely take the time to slow down and actually share those as a group. And the result is people are jumping to conclusions. They already have identified what they think the best solution is, without linking that directly to the observations and interpretation of the group. So we're going to try to do that with a simple method. If you stay in the exact same slide set that we were in, and I'll drop the link back in chat, because I think we had a couple people come and go. Down on slides 30, sort of starting on 37, there's workspaces for this what, so what, now what approach. And Beth, I'm going to have you one more time just give us a little summary again of what you would like the group to do next with the profiles. And I'll try and write it in the format of the what, so what, now what as you're going.
Okay, let's take a profile that interests us and think about what kinds of solutions we might be able to offer that user in the as the air quality ESIP air quality cluster, right? Not as some other, we're not Google, we're we're ESIP. What can we do to provide resources for or help this user, find resources possibly?
Cool, that's so great. So what we're going to ask you to do is, like, in your groups, you're going to pick just one of the different ones. I think you'll actually just keep you in the same breakout groups just for ease. So maybe even the one that you're on. And the first prompt is like, what stands out about this user? What do we know about them? It's sort of like just what are the facts about the user? So you wrote something. What stands out about this group of people, or the user that the group of people that this user represents? So what seems sort of like, so then what conclusions can we draw about their needs? Sorry. Now what can we actually offer them? Does that make sense as a sequence? So like really try as best you can, like, what do we know? What's true about this user? What stands out about them? So based on our answers to those questions, like, so what does that mean? Like, what are the implications of that? So what conclusions can we draw? Now, what do we actually want to offer them? So again, this is like, it's a little messy. We're doing this in real time. Beth is being such a sport and helping us create the tiniest bit of working context to share something on. So do your best to try and move from, like, taking a profile. What do we know about this person or this group of people? So what does that mean their needs might be? Now, what can we actually offer them? And we'll spend, let's do same groups we'll do about 8 minutes this time.
Certainly displaying it would be easy that way.
I love it. Sometimes like the audio comes back into the main room before people show up. So I just hear laughs or other things. It's very fun.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's lovely to hear people's just like laughs and enthusiasm, it sounds like. So one option here, and anytime you're doing breakouts, is to, you could have each group do a little report, lots of choices that you can make coming out of breakouts. But I think what might be helpful here is there just one group that's willing to sort of just demonstrate for us or share how you worked from the what to the so what to the now what, and really highlight, what options you came up with that could be services delivered for a specific group or user. You don't have to talk us through comprehensively everything, just like the light sketch of like, here's who we started with, this is what we observed or know about them. These are the conclusions we drew. Now here are some of the ideas we came up with.
This is a perfect example of, it's nice when you give instructions to go, if you do this for getting work done, going into breakout rooms, to have part of the instructions on the template that they're writing on, that before they exit the breakout room, to have someone that's going to volunteer to be the room's representative. And that way, when you get back, they know they're going to be speaking and you're not waiting for someone. People are going to be hesitant to speak up, right? So to take care of that. So this demonstrated that perfectly.
Especially if they didn't follow the instructions.
Yeah, I would say I can speak up for our group that didn't follow instructions because that was my fault.
Well, Michaela maybe, and then Sarah will hear your sequence too.
We should be pretty quick. So ours started on slide 58. And so we kind of did the list of what's, kind of thinking about problems of what's our issue with our person, our profile. Our person is in China as a parent, and they are thinking about how to evaluate whether or not it's actually safe to go outside and evaluate the air quality data because it's differing quality. So is it safe to be outside? And then think about your child. Can schools, or from a school perspective, let's say a kindergarten class, can they allow students to the playground? Right. So that's the what. The so what. Well, there's not really a way currently to evaluate the quality of the data quickly. You can't just go to a source and say, okay, that's a good one or not a good one. And then to understand children's safety outside, kind of what level. And then the now what. So what solutions can ESIP provide, or our group? We can evaluate the quality of the quality of the data and kind of do a trust ranking of sources. Like this one's usually pretty good, this one's never good. And then use that to evaluate. Schools could, get sensors and do their own, threshold for when they want to send kids outside. Go outside and play, trust us, it'll be fine. But yeah, that's kind of what we come up with. So
cool. It's nice when any group sort of has to interpret very imperfect instructions and comes up with something pretty cool. So thank you for doing that. I'd love to hear how Sarah, how did your group take that task of messy instructions?
Well, I decided to commandeer it and turn it into a meta discussion about the method, because we're hosting a session at the winter meeting. And I thought this might be a good method for us to use.
Cool, great.
So I turned it into a bit of meta discussion of how we might apply it and would it be fruitful for that community, because I just happen to be in a group with some people who are part of that community. And then develop a little bit of a plan as to, well, we did the what at the summer session last year. So
Oh,
this
cool. Yeah.
session could focus on the so what and the now what, and we might provide some presentations of we had a list of, I think, like 15 things that came out of the summer session. We might highlight 5 or 6 of them and say, well, here's some so what topics, a brief bit of time to review them in groups, and then maybe try and build off of them into some action items for the cluster.
That's very cool that you think about stretching that temporally, like from the summer into, that's a nice way to also create some consistency across time for people that come. That's very cool. Sweet. That's great that you did that.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for this. I think
Cool.
it's great because then people feel engaged. It builds off of what we already did, like you said, and it
Sure.
also helps us say we're actually being thoughtful about the actions the community might take and not just jumping into, well, here's a list, let's do the actions.
Cool. Sweet. Fun. Thank you for sharing that and for taking the time and using it in the way that you needed to. That's also great. Any other thoughts people had just quickly about Beth's challenge here? Like take a profile and elaborate on it a little bit more.
I'll add a comment, and that
Yeah.
is that seeing that several people had hit the same kind of topic, and one group had actually listed out the questions and then put the feedback very neatly under each question. And I found that to be really a very helpful way to look at the response. It was more organized. And so in using this, I think I would very clearly put that into a PowerPoint. So that people can just jump in and shovel their ideas in the right spot.
Totally. And are you talking specifically about slide 28, Karen?
I think so.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So, oh, sorry, Chris. Okay. Yeah. So absolutely, Karen, thinking about how much structure you want to sort of create that helps people quickly get into the task at hand without having to sort of process, well, how do I organize myself to do the task? And I think that's kind of what Charlie's going to take us through next is like, as session hosts, how much do you need to sort of almost pre-process the topics for people and set up the scaffolding so that they can just step right into the thing that you want to work on? And how much of the session is about doing that work together, right? Sometimes it's helpful to do the scaffold building together. Sometimes it's helpful for you to sort of pre-establish the scaffolding so people can provide the inputs that you need them to work with. And those are real choices that you have to sort of sort out on your own. There's no good practice we can provide with those. It's so dependent on what you're trying to create and what you're trying to do together. So there's no like hard and fast rule, I think, that we can create around that. But that's a lovely way, I think, Karen, for us to transition to thinking about like, okay, how much of this do I need to provide up front so that people can plug and play? And how much do we need to think about creating or shaping the scaffold building together as a group when people show up? So Charlie, do you want to take over and help us transition to people starting to think about their actual session designs and working on these bigger sort of meta questions together?
Yes, going back to the worksheet, if you
pull that
click,
up too.
or, do you want me to share or do you want to share? Okay. We'll do that. Okay. So going back to the worksheet under the getting the work done together, because this particular getting work together requires a lot of decision making. I ended up creating this little decision making guide. If you click on the title, and it comes up and it's like, these are the questions that I ask myself when I would be helping you design a session. It's like in the very beginning, like, how am I identifying the task that's going to be worked on in the session? Are you going to identify those first so that you can get right to work, or are you going to need the participants to help identify those things? And you can see there, and one of the options is using what, so what, now what to do that. Let's see. And then the other a big decision is, how are you going to organize the participants around the work? Does everyone need to work on every single task, or can you distribute the work in some way? Each breakout associated with a different task to be done, for instance. And then let's see, how are you going to set up a structure, structuring the work to be done into breakouts so that the processes are really clear and it's easy for participants to stay focused while working together virtually. And this gets to the last conversation that we were just having, that what we've been seeing is that the more specific, focused and specific the task, the easier it is. Like, you don't need to put as much planning and preparing the breakouts and giving them sheets and directions and that kind of thing. But the more ambiguous and complex or complicated the task is, the more that you're going to need to think out what is the structure and process for participants to think through and type in and work, have the conversations together in their breakouts. Let's see. And then the other part is, then after they've been in breakouts, do you, how are you going to do how's everybody going to find out what happened in breakouts? Are they going to be able to review the items generated together through some cloud-based, either using docs or Murally or slides? And do you need to have a spokesperson briefly talk about what the summary of that work was? And then, of course, then the technology that you're going to use to support that. Let's see, in that column, the getting work done column, I've created a folder with if you click on it, and I can show you here. So here's the decision-making aid that we just walked through. A getting work done in breakouts using what now what? Okay, it's not, oh, here we go. And here you can see this was in, this might be an example of what you use in Kiko Chat, in tabs or in slides, with giving them instructions with the time for each round, and then the prompts and a place for participants to write their answers. So just that, a bit of instruction helps quite a bit. Let's see, and then this particular one, the sample breakout, multidisciplinary collaboration. I just wanted to give you an example of a breakout that might be really, really complex, that has multiple rounds, what that might look like with multiple steps, the timing, something that's a little bit more complex than the what, so what, now what. And feel free to use what you can use from these and adapt them in any way that might be helpful. I think at this point it would be good to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, I think. I would like to maybe get a different volunteer that would like Fisher and I to work through this template with your breakout session. Just work through that out loud with everyone. Is there someone else that would like a little bit of help in real time designing their session?
Karen Moe and Dave Jones might.
Cool. So we'll do this just really quickly, I think, again, this is just sort of so people get a sense of how this works, but I think we only want to spend like 5 minutes on this, Charlie, so that we can get people into their own work time. Does that make sense?
Sounds great.
So Dave and Karen, I'm gonna go into screen share so that we just take everybody through the sequence again. Okay. So I've, for instance, opened up the wrong thing, this thing, and I'm going to make a copy of it. And what's the title of your session, Dave and Karen?
We're the disaster lifecycle cluster. So we're identifying trusted data sources for California wildfires,
Cool.
and understanding the process of what trusted data, and as it comes from creation from a state of California perspective to NASA's research data, how can that be used and trusted, and how can NOAA's modeling data be used and trusted, things
Cool.
like that.
So for both of you, as you look across these top elements, just this row, which of these feel like the things that you want to definitely make sure happen in your session? Are there any of these that you're like, we probably need to do that, we probably need to do that, we probably need to do that?
Well, I mean, I was writing down some things, listening to all the different discussions, and the first thing I wrote is, what do we want to accomplish in the disaster lifecycle cluster session, right?
Mhm.
We want to accomplish a lot, but what are the key things that we might be able to take away? And I wrote identifying trusted data sources for wildfire support and decision making, for the Western wildfires. That would be one. And then that would probably lead us into a conversation with the panelists as to how do they define trusted?
Okay.
How do they define trusted data?
So you're gonna have a panel. That's
Yes.
what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
We're having the geospatial information officer for the state of California as
Okay.
one panelist.
Okay. Then what else do you think is gonna happen?
That we're also having a NOAA modeler, the high resolution rapid refresh, the HER smoke model developer out of NOAA Esrel. So we're going to talk about how they model and provide that data for decision makers. And then there's another speaker, Maggie Glasgow, who's a member of the Federation, who is from NASA JPL, and she's going to talk about NASA projects and how they evolve into operational products, perhaps. We haven't really defined that role for Maggie yet, but that's along the lines of what we'd like her to talk about.
Okay, so it sounds like, can I just pause for a second? So it
Sure.
sounds like you're almost not going to have a panel. You're going to have sort of 3 sequential presentations. Is that true?
Right, but to have them participate in the discussion.
Okay. So elaborate more what you mean that you want to have them participate in the discussion.
So like for NOAA, the modeler, we're going to talk about what goes into their model and why do they think that should be the model of choice for decision making. And since it just migrated over into operational weather service products, that's probably the main reason. But we really want to show people like the geospatial information officer in California that there's an organization called ESIP and the disaster lifecycle cluster and other clusters that are focusing on data integrity, data trust, and all that sort of stuff that can be used, accessed and used for decision makers. So then we assign what we've come up with in the Federation on an operational readiness level to that data, and it can be trusted immediately from people who access it and want to use it.
Okay. Charlie, are you hearing anything that's helping you think about what might match to Dave's description or Karen's description?
Well, first he's going to probably set some kind of context, right, in the beginning. Create a context for the session. Let me go there. Are you going to, do you want the participants, are they going to do any pre-work? Do they need to know anything or have thought about things before they show up, or can they just show up?
Well, they can show up, but we're going to provide them with more context about the meeting and what we would like for them to talk about. We tried to get the geospatial information officer for the winter, for the summer meeting, and he was just too busy. But now we're hoping that he'll, be armed with, here's how we approach our data challenge in California.
So that's for the panelists that the guest you're inviting, right? But the participants that show up can just show up, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And what I'm hearing, I'm not sure if it would be, I might suggest a user experience fishbowl, but it might do a little bit, it sounds like you've got multiple panelists that are talking about the same theme or the same question about trusted data sources.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if user experience fishbowl might be interesting because you said that you wanted the panelists to talk to each other, right? To hear what each other's saying and then comment on what they're hearing from the other panelists. Is that right?
Well, and kind of create this collaborative conversation about how they approach data and the use of data, and also to enlighten all of them and the attendees about new data sources that are available.
So a little bit of combination of presentation and panel discussion, maybe a UX fishbowl, and maybe a little bit of a presentation also.
Because I think that some of the participants would also have that kind of expertise to contribute, beyond our invited speakers.
So what that could be part of, if you look up the user experience fishbowl link that talks about that, there's part of that where you've got panelists, or what we call them fish, that they're having a conversation with each other, but then you're bringing in the participants to co-shape or either questions to the panelist or what they know about it. And so I would go ahead and, so you could do presentation or the fishbowl is an option. But you're in the Q&A and sense making category. You're wanting to tap the intelligence of the participants and what they know. So I would do some type of breakout that is around sense making about what they're hearing. Let's see, either using the what, so what now, what, like what did we just hear? What all did we hear? What, and having everyone type into a document in their breakouts what they heard, what's missing from this conversation. So given everything that everyone is hearing and making sense of, and everything that you know, so what? So what's missing from this? And then the what can be, what do we want the panelists? So what comes out of the breakouts is, what do we need the panelists to respond to now, right? What's next? Is for an example. You could use any kind of questions, but doing some kind of sense-making guide, structured note-taking here, basically is like giving participants some type of notes or guide of writing that when they're hearing, they can record their thoughts, their ideas, their concerns and questions, so that they have that when they go into a breakout to discuss with other people. That's what that's for.
So Charlie, let me ask you, with this kind of approach, which I love, and thanks for providing this kind of spreadsheet. This is really amazing. I can't wait to dive into these documents and look at them. But how much all of these steps really help to define the context laying, right? The setting the context for the state for the session, and explaining to people what we want to accomplish. Here are the reference documents, or here's what we're going to dive into. And I guess it makes that, what is the introductory time? Maybe 10 minutes? Is that what you think? Or
yeah, the time we've given for that kind of thing is no more than 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay.
Right? Just
okay.
No more than that. And even when you're given a presentation, we've got 10 to 20 minutes there. It's like, you don't want to, after 20 minutes, virtually people start kind of zoning out or doing other things. So you want to keep participants engaged, make the presentation time short, and then do some kind of activity where you're engaging participants, whether you're putting them in breakouts, having them do chat, having them do just various things, writing, alone time, writing, reflecting, to keep them engaged before you continue with any kind of continued presentation.
Okay, that's great.
It sounds also like for me, when you when you go into breakouts, that you're going to want everyone talking about the same thing, right? It doesn't sound like the participants, that there will be different themes that you want to break. I mean, is it possible that each breakout you might want to say this breakout's going to talk about this area of trusted data, and this breakout's going to talk about another area, and then people could, using Zoom now, they can self-select what group that they go into. That's another option.
You know, there could be, I'm really thinking about that as you're talking. And Karen, I'm thinking maybe if we do breakouts, maybe one is use of model data in decision making. Another one might be use of observational and logistical data from a state of California perspective in decision making. And maybe another one is use of research data. How do you put NASA data to work to support decision makers, even though NASA data isn't operational? So maybe there are three or four different breakout sessions that people can join and then come back with answers, and maybe that's the discussion at the end. I mean, that seems like.
Yeah, and I also like the idea that there would be a now what part of the discussion, because that one of the goals is to use the winter meeting to set ourselves up for the first half of this year as we follow up after the meeting.
Yeah,
so
and the
having
theme of
those
the
open
whole
questions come out.
that's yeah, and the theme of the whole ESIP meeting is setting the stage for new data frontiers for future kind of applications of this data, and what we can also take out of it is are these applications which we can feed back into NASA or feed back into NOAA, so they can really see that the ESIP meeting is something worthwhile that comes out to benefit them.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're going to need some kind of closing presentation. And we've got 5 minutes here, but you might, since you're wanting to invite membership in this cluster, in this work, that might be longer for you, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you're going to want to do a presentation and some kind of sign up or invitation to get people to, right?
What do you mean?
That I want to stay informed. Yeah.
What do you mean sign up? I'm sorry, Charlie.
Like if they want to sign up to be some way that you collect participants' names that wants to stay informed, that want to be involved.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be signing up for the disaster lifecycle cluster because we have meetings every month.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Okay.
So that gives you kind of a sense of the design of your session to start with.
Thank you. It's great.
And Charlie and Fisher, if I can just add one thing right here, I think something Karen said a moment ago is really important to keep in mind as you work through this. You might work through this amazing template and realize you can't fit everything in that you want to fit in, and that's okay. Those are probably the hardest design decisions you're going to have to make. But for most of you, remember, like, this is something you're working on all year long. So how does this get you one step closer to where you want to be the rest of the year in your group, or even where you want to be in February in your regular cluster telecon if you're part of an ESIP cluster. So don't feel like you have to fit it all in there, but we're really excited for you to try this out.
Yeah, so what Fisher and I've had planned here is to give you some time to work on your own worksheet. Ask us questions in real time here as you're working through your worksheet. If anybody wants to work through their worksheet in silence and not hear any chatter, we can put you in a breakout room. But then after the time of working on your worksheet, we've got 2 more activities to show you and annotate in the impromptu networking, so you get a sense of what those structures are that you might want to. So wanted to let you know in case you want to drop off now.
Yeah, so Charlie, I think, Charlie, we won't do the impromptu networking. I think let's just spend the next 10 or 15 minutes in the worksheet, and then we'll just come back quickly at the end to conclude.
And
but
Fisher?
Yeah, Dave.
I'm sorry, can I get the link of the document you're working on for
Yeah,
us?
I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. I have a couple people who wanted breakout rooms, so I'm going to create those right now for them. We'll have you in there for about 15 minutes, and then we'll all briefly reconvene in the main session room before we say goodbye and do one last annotation.
And just to let you remind you that we've got office hours. So as you work on this, if you have more questions, you can attend the office hours next week, or just email us and we could chat with you.
This is great. I appreciate your guys doing this and the flexibility. I'm also co-chairing the one of the AMS meetings, which goes all through next week. So having these times are great and flexibility. So thank you.
Cool. Dave, here's the link.
Okay. Thanks, Fisher.
Your document, yeah. Yeah, if anybody else has a co-worker on the call that you want to, spend some time with in a breakout room, let us know. There's a couple people that are doing that.
Brenda and Shweta, would you like to go into a breakout room together? I know you're co-organizing a session.
Oh yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
Sounds good. And thanks for remembering us, Megan.
Fisher, do you mind doing that?
I'm doing that, yep.
And then I don't know if Dave and Karen want to be together in the same room.
Sure.
Yeah, and if anybody else has, while we're in here, if you're just working alone, that's great. If you have specific questions about a method or about, clarifying what you're trying to achieve, or you're like, I know what I have in my mind I want to do, but I don't know how that matches up to specific things, we can absolutely workshop through something in the room right now.
Fisher and Sherry, I do have a question regarding about my session that we're not quite sure if it completely fits like getting work done, because it sounds what we want to do is kind of combination of getting the work done and then laying down some foundation, getting more people to join this work on the topic of AI, so-called AI ready data. And we want to bring together a group of users, data providers, as well as the engineer and software, like service providers, and to see how we can first identify a framework that for the next 6 to 8 months that will work together on identifying the tools and the framework, how we assess the data readiness for AI applications, and that would be across agencies or the data providers. So I hope this gives you a basic idea of what our session is trying to do.
So let me say it back, and then you can let us know how clearly we heard it. So you're going to bring together sort of a loose network of people who kind of need each other, sort of, but they're not necessarily working together on specific things yet. And together you want to essentially put together a work plan for the next 6 to 9 months?
Yes. So basically the session would be identifying the priorities and finding the people who want to join the group, work together for this.
Okay, so finding the people, yeah.
Oops. And as you're thinking of this, Yuhan, do you think this is 10, 20, 60 people, 80 people, 200 people?
I mean, in the session, I'm assuming it's like more than 20 people, but I think at the end who join, who participated actively in the longer run would be definitely less than that, because people comes in and out.
And do you have a draft idea of what the priorities are already yourself?
We do have some metrics to assessing the the readiness of the data, but that one is just a general framework, and it's still need to be implemented in some ways. So we have a brief idea, but.
So it sounds like a little bit of presenting what you have, like where things are starting, and asking participants to go, what are we missing? What else needs to happen for assessing data readiness? Is that right?
Yes.
And then what would be the next step? Would it be then, okay, we've got the list of what we need to do to assess data readiness. Now, who else needs to be involved?
So yeah, so we'll have representatives from different agencies we want to work together in the future. And also some other like partners we already invited to our session. So like ideally, we hope they will be involved in this like ongoing efforts for the, and we were actually thinking that having a like 1 day workshop or like half-day workshop in the summer meeting, so we can bring people back together, like, and keep working on this specific topic. But we already have more work done in between the winter meeting and the summer meeting.
One, I don't know if this is going to be a super helpful option, but it seems like it could be. There's a method that we use called purpose to practice, Yuhan. And it's kind of like a planning and coordination method. So it helps people sort of like plan, prioritize, and then coordinate what they're going to do together. And it's pretty straightforward. There's 5 sort of elements that you clarify together as a group. So the first element is the purpose, like, why is this important? What are we trying to achieve? What's our ambition? And that could be something that either you already have defined or you work with the group to sort of clarify. The second element is the principles, which are sort of like, what are the rules that are going to be guiding essentially our decision-making as we move forward. The third element is the participants, like who needs to actually be involved in this? What's the network of people that'll make this happen? And then the fourth and fifth elements are structure and practices or products. And the structure is like, what kinds of resources do we need? How are we going to organize ourselves? What kinds of work will get done? And then the practices and products, like what are we actually going to deliver? What tools are we going to use? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can imagine in this session, you might be able to use like purpose, structure, and practices. You might be able to organize it sort of that way. Maybe you don't use all 5 elements, but you might use 3 of the elements or 4 of the elements, and sort of progressively as a group answer those things. Like, what is it we're trying to achieve? Why does this matter? What's important? What's critical about it? How do we need to organize ourselves? What are the things that need to be done, and how are we going to prioritize them?
Right now we did like solicit like couple like quick talks, so we call it lightning talks, to like provide different perspective from like various agencies or like data providers. But I think one piece that we're missing right now is the user like perspective. So we want to have like to see, because this data is like meaningless if there's nobody using it, right? Even if we think it's ready, if the user think it's not ready, then it doesn't really make much sense as assessment. So we definitely want more like input from the user on what the AI readiness means for the users.
Johan, it almost sounds like you're proposing a new cluster, or like proposing a new cluster without proposing a new cluster. I just
we definitely don't want to propose a new cluster, because we want to bring clusters together to work on it, because I can see like multiple clusters
6 months from now, Johan will start a new cluster.
No.
What was that, Kai?
I said in 6 months, he's going to be starting a new cluster with us.
You'll realize it's too much work for the existing ones, but I appreciate that you're not trying to start a new initiative without thinking carefully about how it fits in with the existing ones.
So that's interesting, because in the discovery cluster, we're kind of looking at doing something analogous, which is to figure out collaborations with other clusters. And I think one of the issues is going to be, both for your case and our case, that you get spread too thinly. And so, it becomes too difficult to get anything done. And so I think the question that we have to ask ourselves, and maybe, I hate to suggest this, but maybe our two clusters ought to talk to each other, is to figure out if there's a way to enable those kinds of collaborations to be more emergent.
Yeah, I agree, because I know this is like way too much for a machine learning cluster can take on like for the next couple months, because there are already other things planned want to do. But also, we definitely need like people from the machine learning cluster to be involved in this like work. So there's a fine line to work in between like having some cluster leading it or like having a completely new group of people working on it.
So at the risk of suggesting a new cluster, it feels like, it would be useful if we had a collaboration cluster, which worked on methods of collaboration that could be both efficient and effective.
Chris, you're spot on. It was interesting. I was reviewing my board report for our board meeting next week with our current president, and there was a write-up in there about discovery, and she said, I call this cross-cluster collaboration, and said, absolutely. I'm looking at, so within our structure, we have the ESIP program committee, which has representation from multiple committees. And I'm looking at how do we charge that program committee next year with developing some mechanisms to further enable and kind of formalize how we can really solidify this cross-cluster collaboration, because yeah, it's popping up everywhere and it should, but we're all kind of, wherever I see it, people are like, this is great, this is what we want, but how do we get more of it without stretching people further?
And I know at AGU, they used to have like, you have focus group first, and then if the focus group becomes like really strong, and then they become a section, and that's, you have a evolution process. So you have a group of people started working on it as a side gig, and then when it becomes like more prominent, and then becomes upgraded into a regular group or regular section, things like that.
Johan, is there also like a dissolution task to make sure like certain things also get dissolved eventually?
That's an important part of the process, yes.
Yeah.
Old clusters never die, they just gradually fade away.
I think at ESIP it's called like hibernation.
That's the word we've been using lately. But Chris, this topic came up yesterday also. Somebody asked that exact question. Is there a group in ESIP that's specifically focused on cross-collaboration connections? So I have my own personal list of people who are extremely interested in this topic.
Well, so Kai left. Johan, I don't know if we're providing any help at all in thinking about your actual session design. But maybe a session design migrates towards this question about like how do we do this?
I do wonder if there's any people trying to combine different session like planning to different type of session planning together. So pick part of it from the getting work done and pick part of it from like
for sure. Oh yeah, for sure. That was part of for the workshops. We just tried to highlight one sort of element, but I think most of the sessions combine multiple elements where they're trying to get work done, they're trying to share the state of the art of something, and at the same time they want to get a consultation, for instance. yeah, feel free to stretch out across the different elements.
Thanks, it's really helpful. And I think at the beginning we'll try to have an annotation game. We're asking people to identify them on a map of data provider, data user, and so basically a triangle, so they can place like wherever they want to be, because they can be purely just data provider, they can be like service provider or like software engineer, they can be like pure like user, but most of the times people are in between, especially the people attending ESIP tends to be in between, can be users and providers, can be engineer and providers at the same time. So it'll be fun to see how people identify themselves on that map.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a great idea. How much more time do they have, Fisher?
They're coming back now.
Megan and Susan, is there anything that you feel like we probably need to talk a little bit more about to wrap up, that we may still be confusing about this worksheet, or something they may need that we haven't talked about?
Time zero.
I think just knowing about the sessions next week, I think from my perspective is the most important thing.
Yeah, a little highlight of the, what the 2 remaining sessions will and how they'll be different. And I always personally find most valuable when you just get to experience a technique, because I find that sets off light bulbs of how you, oh, okay, I see how I could put that in play.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay.
Cool. So welcome back, everybody. We're going to close out, do one little thing and then a couple of reminders. So, we're on Zoom now. Zoom has this fun annotation feature. We were just actually talking in the main session. It felt like, in some ways, like ESIP strategy, but Yuhan was saying wanting to do some annotation work. And so a very, very simple way to get a bit of detail from people at the end of the session is to ask them to pull up annotation. And so if you look at the top of your screen, there's a little green bar that says you're viewing Fisher's screen. And next to that is view options. And if you pull up the annotation menu, you can just sort of put a dot somewhere on this little map in terms of how are you doing as a result of this? Are you, a little, yeah, great. Some bewilderment is always good. They have this new thing. I'll turn off where people are annotating. You don't see your names on there. But fun, simple little way to, highlight. Highlight where people are. Cool. And, oh, right. Sorry, Brenda. That is the one thing that I always forget to say. If you're on the web version, unfortunately, annotation is not available. So that might be something to think about, especially if there's going to be a number of participants who are on the web. They can't access annotation.
Yeah, I like that.
Or they could type it into chat and you could put it there for them, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that can be done. Just share a Google slide so people can just add in things on the Google slides.
Yeah, you can do that too, for sure, Yuhan. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, doing it on a Google slide works just as fine as well. Yep. So tomorrow, there's 2 more workshops. One of them will highlight a method that's really designed for how to get consultation or get feedback on an idea. It's really a supportive consultation method that helps you advance an idea or pull it forward. And the second workshop is focused on, like, if you have a lot of presentations in your session, how do you break those up in a way that invite the participants, just as Karen and Dave were saying, how do you rely both on the presenter's knowledge and the participants' knowledge to co-shape something, and not just rely on the presenters to share what they have to say. There's also some office hours if you just want to look more in detail at your own session. Next week, there's 2 dates for that. And I think Susan has something to say. And Charlie, anything you want to add?
I think you've covered everything that we need to. Megan's typed in when
ignore me. I misread something on the slide, so just forget everything I said.
Did the same thing. I just wanted to say thank you to Charlie and Fisher. This has been great, and I'm just thrilled to see over 20 people here. I think in my 5-word bio, I said something about wanting to change the world, and you know, Zoom fatigue is real. Getting people to engage in online meetings is a struggle, and I'm just really appreciative of all of you for investing the time to learn how we can be the very best we can be and have the best meeting we can be. And I hope that this is useful to you in your personal life too. I'm leading a Boy Scout merit badge in sustainability, and I'm trying to keep it engaging for a bunch of preteen and teenage boys. So I hope that this is us investing in your skills and that it pays back to our community and beyond. So thank you all.